Welcome to Cannabis News and Views, your biweekly program about the dynamic and challenging world of cannabis in California and beyond. I'm your host, Jude Tillman. Since 2013, public perception of the value of cannabis in treating health issues has shifted. That year, CNN Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sanjay Gupta reported on cannabidiol, or CBD, which was used in Colorado to successfully treat epilepsy in 5-year-old Charlotte Fiji. Soon after her story was known, a surge in canna migrants to Colorado occurred as families sought help for their epileptic children. Gupta's docuseries on CNN, Weed 1, 2, and 3, along with CBS 60 Minutes, national and local news stories, and countless op-ed pieces and columns in newspapers, and countless personal testimonies before state and national legislative bodies by patients, caregivers, medical and scientific experts. All this led to the point today where 29 states have legalized the use of cannabis for medical purposes. We have won important policy changes across the nation. But we're still lacking in our understanding of the personal challenges that accompany the decision to choose and use cannabis medicines. Both our perception of the issue and the inclination of patients and caregivers to remain private, for good reasons, have kept these stories from being told. We aren't yet hearing them on local public affairs programs or NPR's StoryCorps. So our guests today are two individuals willing to share their stories. They've experienced the challenges of choosing medicinal cannabis to treat the severe health crises of their loved ones. We're going to talk about the decisions they made with their husbands, each facing grave illness, and we'll talk about how this journey impacted each of them as caregivers. I'm very grateful to welcome to Cannabis News and Views today Linda Francis, sitting to my right, and Jan Neal, also on the program, who's joining us by Skype from Lake County. Welcome, both of you, and thank you for being here. A little bit about my guest today. So Linda Francis is retired. Lucky her. She has a master's in education. She spent 20 years working with people with developmental disabilities. She was for 20 years a consultant and trainer in the construction industry. And her husband, John, was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, in January 2014, and he passed away in January 2016. During that time, Linda was, of course, his primary caregiver. Jan Neal, with us, joining us by Skype, is an herbalist. She's 69 years old. She boasts of being a great-grandmother. She's been a caregiver for her husband, Keith, for 19 months now, since he received a diagnosis of renal carcinoma, liver cancer, stage 3 advanced. And she wanted it known that she personally does not use cannabis to smoke or, more generally, for recreational use. Welcome, Jan. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So basically, we're going to tell a story. We're going to tell two stories that intersect. Some of them have points in common and some not. And our viewers, I hope, will benefit from learning about both of you and what you've gone through over the last few years, because it's a story that's not often told. And it's a story that even without the quote-unquote edge of cannabis medicine being involved, it's a hard story. It's a hard story to be a caregiver for someone who's suffering from a very extreme illness. And it's also tricky because we're talking about, not just anybody. We're talking about your husbands, your life partners. And that's
I kept my hanky in my pocket.
All right. All right.
That's the way it is.
Yeah. And in some ways, the way it's different is that in one instance, we've lost your partner. And in the other instance, we have some very promising advances with your partner, Jan. So those are two different angles, but it's basically the same story. You know, it's the same story. It's a hard thing to go through. So let's start our conversation at the beginning. And when I ask each of you how you thought about something or how you feel about something, I'm also meaning for you to include how Keith and John thought about or felt about or feel about certain things, to the extent that you feel comfortable sharing their views. Totally up to you. So when you first got the diagnoses, each of you, with your partners, with your husbands, how did that land? How did that feel? What did you think was your next step? Give us a sense, a composite sense of those moments, if you would. Whoever wants to go first.
Go ahead, Jan.
Shock, tears, fear, and then reality set in, and I decided that I needed to call in to my higher power. When we were cancer is very, very personal cancer care over the years. And he said, figuratively said to the doctor, then get the hell out of my way because here I come. And the journey began. The fight was on. We're cannabis oil capitals. And then the journey began.
So you did where you weren't going to cannabis.
Oh, no. I personally, for me, don't want chemotherapy, radiation therapy, surgery. Prefer not. I'm an herbalist. Weed is a weed is a weed. A plant is a plant is a plant. And having been in the world and living in Humboldt County, I'm very familiar with cannabis. And Dragonfly Wellness Center pulled together many, many herbs and then researched the cannabis and then started there.
Okay, I want to hear just the beginning also from Linda. But before she does, what's HPRC? So our listeners, our viewers know.
Humboldt Patient Resource Center in Arcata.
Okay, thank you. It's good to know. Linda, first moments.
Well, ALS is, first, it's something that we were actually lucky to find out about within a year. John probably started presenting a year before we got the diagnosis. But, you think it started in his right foot, so we went to podiatrists and this, that, and the other things, and he finally got sent to a physical therapist, but he was getting these fasciculations, which were like little muscle twitches on his arms, his legs, and in his torso. And the physical therapist in Ukiah just says, this is crazy. I'm not, Sent us back to our GP, who then finally sent us to a neurologist. So the neurologist is looking at him and, having him do this, that, and the other thing. And I was, of course, there because that's how John and I did things. And the neurologist sits back and goes, at that point, we were thinking maybe it was a spinal stenosis or something. He goes, I think, and he just almost said it kind of like processing. He says, I think it's ALS.
Whoa.
And I literally bent over. And it was like somebody hit me in the stomach. Because who in the hell gets ALS? I mean, it's not even on your radar, And I literally had to get up. I had to leave the room for a minute and came back. And he says, but we need a confirming diagnosis. And it took us 3 weeks to get down to California Pacific Medical Center in San Francisco. And that was probably the worst 3 weeks of my life. John and I had to literally be in constant contact. And you don't tell your friends because why ruin somebody's day when you don't actually have a diagnosis yet. And we got the confirming diagnosis down there, and we had spent the night. And I remember walking down to the hotel, and I started writing a journal that day. And the first page of my journal says, John has ALS, John has ALS, John has ALS, John has ALS. And the difference between ALS and cancer is cancer, you can fight. There's a battle out there to be won, and we have a chance to win it. I finally started thinking ALS is is a death sentence. How long it takes you to get from here to there. I mean, there's Stephen Hawking's, of course. I finally started describing this more like a spectator sport because there's nothing you can really do. You just watch your loved one lose more and more of his ability to function. So it was a little different.
It is different. What's interesting is because Jan has the background as an herbalist, and cancer, as you said, is something we all kind of feel like, well, that's something I can fight, though not everyone chooses to do it.
Right, but it's a choice.
But you can choose, and ALS is this sort of, this death sentence, I think. You're right. And so what did you think you would, that connotes, well, nothing we can do, throw your hands up and be passive, but that's not what you chose to do.
Well, it's interesting because the doc says, go out and live your life as long as you can, because by then John was still, was still mobile. And by the end, he was in a, huge power wheelchair and, had no ability to use any part of his body. So, but we're going to be the ones that are going to discover the cure. And we worked with a osteopath who was a family osteopath we knew, and tried a variety of things there. We did Kaya hot oil, which I think contributed. But and the internet was made for my husband. He could find anything shopping, but he started researching cannabis. And tripped on the whole thing of green cannabis because he didn't want to get high. I mean, we graduated in the 60s. We smoked pot in the old days and haven't probably smoked for 4 decades. And it was a different smoke then.
Very different,
the stuff they smoke now is like, but that's neither here nor there. So we got tripped on this green pot thing. And then there was a doctor kind of passing through town for $200 would say, yeah, you qualify and you get your piece of paper and now you're legal to do medicinal marijuana. And then being in Mendocino County, you go, well, I think we'd like to try this. And 2 plants show up because this is Mendocino County. So that's where we started.
Well, were you and John, and I want to ask if you, Jan, you and Keith, were you both on the same page about let's go with cannabis or not? Or did you have to do some convincing?
No, for us, we had nothing to lose. Yeah. With ALS, it's like they should, in fact, there's a new drug right now that supposedly extends life, and it actually came out of Japan, and it was through the FDA in 6 months, because what's it going to do, kill me? So there's this whole different kind of mindset. Yeah, we'll try it, because really we had absolutely nothing to lose. And one of our goals, it wasn't so much, was to maybe extend John's life, but also in terms of the quality of his life. And those fasciculations were very, very disconcerting and very uncomfortable. And we were looking for some symptom management.
Symptom management, just quality of life.
Quality of life, yeah. Quality of life, symptom management, and the ability to say, how long can we go in a body that he was happy to live in.
Absolutely right. It's a very practical approach. Jan, Keith married you knowing you were an herbalist, and that was your orientation to life anyway, so you probably didn't have to do a lot of convincing with him that you're going to try cannabis. Is that correct, or was he hesitant?
No, I became an herbalist later in life. I was in corporate accounting and finance in Silicon Valley.
Oh, excuse me.
And then I got cancer.
And
they took the left side of my face. I had 8. And I felt that my journey at that point, I began caring and became hospice timers. I have a very strong personality, you might say, here 4 years ago. And I used cannabis as internal lymphoma. And the doctor said, Jan, go, because at the end you get in a vicious cycle. You can't sleep because together. And gave it to her in a cup of tea. A cup of tea, which I make, is very, very easy to take. You don't have to smoke it. You don't have to figure out how much of a cookie to eat. It's a nice introduction. And so the cycle reversed. And she was beginning to sleep and only get up. And this is not the first time. He knows, and he said, I'm going to leave it up to you. Because it gave him weeks to months with no option. In the 19th church, routine, consistency, the same amount, the right cannabis, high CBD for the tumors, and there's thoughts on, because it's very rare. Many alternatives can cook, and PRC, Dragonfly Wellness, and it is awful physically. Reduced in size, we found out 3 weeks ago. His AFP was 60. That's the liver count marker. 60 is very
wow. You cannot.
Cannabis and herbs, rare. And what goes in the smoothie is important. But how long I could keep him alive. But now we're with that you can give them for those moments that we have to hang on to. It's gut-wrenching.
Right. Yeah, totally. Totally. Well, good for you for being so determined and persistent and for getting to where you've gotten today. But let's keep going back to the process. I think that many people, I certainly know that many people who come into Dragonfly or who call me on the telephone asking for help, they start out from a place of fear. And why wouldn't they? We've got four decades of mainstream media disinforming us about the nature of cannabis, telling us it's a get-high drug, which that was simply a function of the hippie subculture, and not a bad function, but certainly not what cannabis has been for 5,000 years, which is a non-psychoactive healing herb. So we have a whole lot of education to do. And part of what this program is about is the personal journey that each of you bring to that mission, if you don't mind being part of our broader mission. And certainly, I want to bring up to you some of the questions that perhaps you've come across in your own experience or with other people. What do I tell my doctor if my doctor asks me about my using cannabis, or if should I tell my doctor I'm using cannabis? Did either of you face that conundrum at all? Or family and friends? Sometimes people have very strong judgments from family and friends or neighbors or whomever.
I have had other people, but not Keith. But I've had many other people what do I say to them? How do I get them to do this? We're going to do. Lying is not going to help anybody. Cancer doesn't have to be a death sentence. And prayers that one day ALS can be in that same choice. It's a choice. My mother always responsible for that choice. So I will give people, 2 weeks ago, a lady called, and she'd heard me talking to Keith, and I met her, and she had gotten a 215. And she said, Jen, I didn't know what to do, and it scared me to death, and my 83-year-old mother was just beside herself. So I went down to oncology and sat and took tea and all of the resources that are out there, and we talked and spoke about it. We're prepared to do what the dispensaries do as far as having for Keith, and I only use organic. It's like, okay, I'm not doing chemo. Then it's up to me, and this is what I'm going to do.
But you haven't had pressures from family or friends to do chemo or radiation or anything like that? No pressures?
No. Mm-mm.
You're lucky.
But I've run into many people. I do a lot of consulting and talking about cancer and chemo and versus cannabis. And once you can get there, it's just like this lady did. I've journaled. I also found out that a year before, the doctor took it upon herself to not tell me that they noticed something cancer. So she didn't mention it to me.
That makes me furious when doctors or healthcare providers do that. So you didn't have any problem, given that you were going down to the UC system in San Francisco with doctors?
Oh, no. When they asked for a list of his medicines, right on that list were all of the herbs and the cannabis and the cannabis oil. Question me or deny me. I have had a doctor that will go nameless that I said, well, doc, since there was nothing you could do, the system could, well, and I said, I'm not asking you to make a commitment, and I will not give out your name. And he said, yes, you're winning.
We've found that often to be true, but one of their concerns that are expressed by mainstream medicine and healthcare providers is that, okay, fine, you can do your silly cannabis herbs, but make sure you keep taking those pills. So did you choose to keep taking, in both your cases, did you choose to take whatever pharmaceuticals, whatever drugs they were prescribing? Or
Well, again, there aren't any for ALS.
For ALS, you had no choice.
Yeah, we had no choice. Like I said, we were trying some different things and supplements that, mostly we kind of, John kind of researched out. Our docs knew we were using cannabis. We weren't pulling any punches with them. I mean, with ALS, you got nothing to lose. So, and, my family knew, our friends knew, my 97-year-old mother knew. In fact, she said, do you think it would work for? In fact, we So my mother has actually got a medicinal marijuana card now. We're using it for some issues that she's having, so it's.
Yeah. In case anybody's wondering, Jan mentioned a 215 card, and you just mentioned a card. We should explain that in the state of California, that is a formal recommendation from a healthcare provider that you can legally obtain cannabis from a dispensary. That's what the 215 means. But both of you are being, just a little bit facile. I mean, no problems, no issues, no relatives, no doctors. But there's often an underlying sort of, you're being a little bit naive, or there are problems that we can't anticipate might happening with cannabis, or a lot of people get especially grief for not following the prescription and the protocols that the doctors have assigned. And you've never had any of those problems, huh?
Well, there's no protocols. I mean,
there's no protocols for ALS.
It's weird. I think our biggest challenge was trying to figure out, we had these plants that just appeared.
Yep.
We didn't know the THC CBD story at that point. We're grinding up leaves and making horrible tasting drinks that John did morning and night. And do you want me to go with how we...
Sure.
And then one day in the local paper, there was this little teeny ad for the Long Valley Gardens Club Medicinal Marijuana Renaissance Program up in Laytonville. And I looked at John and I said, and Jeffrey
Hergenrather
was going to be presenting. Dr. Jeffrey Hergenrather would be presenting, and he was the president of the Society of Cannabis Clinicians. So I looked at John and I said, you want to go? And, it was a nice day. It's a nice drive. And so we thought, well, what the heck, So we get in the car, and he could still get in the car then, and drive up there thinking, okay, Laytonville, okay. We expected a whole bunch of stoned out hippies, but we thought, it's a nice day. There's a good Mexican restaurant up there. What the hell? So we get there, and there's about, 40, 50 people. And there are a few dreadlocks, but most people, were kind of normal looking people and obviously knew each other. And there was a lot of camaraderie between them. And we sat in those very horrible metal chairs. And this woman who later became a very dear friend, Jude, gets up to introduce the doctor, Dr. Jeffrey. And he gave this stunningly interesting presentation about cannabis and, about THC and CBD and the fact that they discovered this whole system within the body called the endocannabinoid system. And we were just stunned and we're so taken aback with the information and the knowledge. And what was really got us was the caliber of the questions coming from the audience in terms of the sophistication and the professionalization and the passion for this medicine. And John and I were just going, whoa, this was, we were just completely blown away. And we couldn't stay to the end because John was, had fatigue issues, of course. And so we got up and kind of went out the back, and there was Jude, the woman who had been, the kind of mistress of ceremonies.
Yeah, this is our dear sister Jude Nagel, who was a long-time cultivator and medicine maker who has passed about a year ago, I guess
about a year ago. Yeah. So she's out there just kind of taking a breather, and we started chit-chatting with her and introduced us, and she asked us about, our situation, and, we were open with it. There's no reason to pretend that nothing's happening. And she says, tomorrow, she says, the medicine makers are getting together at the Grange. And she says, why don't you come up and meet everybody? And we're like, what? And she says, yeah, the people that grow and are producing the products and this, that, and the other thing. See, right now all we know is about a green drink that tastes like crap. And all of a sudden this whole cornucopia of possibilities out there, cookies and tinctures and oils and salves. And we're like,
you had no idea.
So she says, come on up. And we go, so we drive home. And the next day I said, well, what do you think? And he goes, well, it's a nice day, and there's that good Mexican restaurant up there. So So we hop in the car and we go back up to Laytonville, and this time to the Grange, and there's only about 20 people there. And again, we were just blown away by the passion and the knowledge and the understanding of their product and how to make the product safe. And they're talking about organic from the dirt up and how to do tinctures and things without having all the bad stuff in there. And John and I were just like, and they went around for introductions. And when they got to John, he said that he was so grateful that he lived here in Mendocino County, where he would have access to this medicine and would know that it was safe and that people understood what the medicine was about in the process. And those people to this day, they treated us with such loving kindness that we went every month to their meeting as long as John could, and then I continued afterward. And, you know, John tried various products. What seemed to work best for him in terms of controlling the fasciculations and the other symptoms was still the green drink. But now we had plants that I knew the CBD THC ratio. I was blown away that people were testing product to find out what was in it. It opened this whole world for us that I'm happy to stand on a rooftop and say, like, wow, these people here in Mendocino County, and that's the only ones I can speak for, really know this business. They know this plant. They know its potential, and they have a passion. And my fear is that this body of knowledge is going to be lost or compromised with the transition we're in, because there's no pill that's going to take care of business. It has to be, as you well know, it has to be tailored to the situation.
The individual.
To the individual. And so with Jude and the medicine makers of Laytonville, and this Jude as well, we've been so fortunate. I mean, nothing was going to save John. You know, we never thought, well, we do, but you know, that somehow he was going to survive this disease. Yeah. But the quality of his existence was greatly enhanced because of this medicine.
So let's talk very specifically. I mean, you just tugged at my heartstrings because this transition we're going through, I'll just go ahead and say it. I live in daily fear that we're going to lose that heritage, the culture, the traditions, the second, third, fourth generation cultivators and medicine makers here, not just in Mendocino, but in Humboldt, in the whole Emerald Triangle, that we're going to lose it to the exigencies of the marketplace, that large investors are going to come in and take over.
Oh, yeah.
And that small businesses are going to get flushed down the toilet, and small businesses...
You know, Jude, I think that that's possible. And I have a real but I know many all family that have been Humboldt County. And if it were not for the cannabis world that stepped up and stepped in, I wouldn't be where I am right now saving Keith's life. And I am determined, and again, very stubborn, very determined to leave a legacy, and so are many others from my herb classes that we took. Some of us have branched. I have a big part from around the world come in. It is up to people, just like she was amazed. And I get very frustrated when they judge cannabis. Do I look like a long-haired hippie? No. And I have some beautiful friends that are long-haired, dreadlocked hippies. I know that this is a medicine. Keith has several other. He's been diagnosed with Parkinson's. High CBD oil, thanks to Jude and her knowledge, my getting back on the computer, has now brought his tremors way down. The doctor said he was 50% improved. We're going back to UCSF in December. The people that are going to lose are the ones that become ostriches. If we do like she did, and she said, okay, well, why not? What do we have to lose? Let's go and take a prescription drug and not look it up and find out probably a lot. And I've had people say, are you afraid? To go and look just like John did. He armed himself. And she backed him up as a team. And go ahead and get on the website like John did and look it up. There are many, many small organizations. I could name a couple dozen at the big business, the pharmaceutical.
And I think that by being on this program, you're helping to contribute to people looking at this completely differently. I want to go back to the personal story and how you've measured progress and how, I mean, in your case, you've got good numbers that you just shared with us, Jan, in terms of improvement in Keith's condition. How did you measure progress, and how did you feel, Linda, that you and John feel that you were actually benefiting from cannabis?
Well, the fasciculations, which is that, became less severe and more manageable. Mm-hmm. But I also think, when you think about how the endocannabinoid system works, so basically the role of the endocannabinoid system in the body is to create homeostasis and equilibrium. And I think it also had a significant contribution to John's equanimity. In fact, at one point I said to him, John, I think that drink you're doing twice a day is really, kind of keeps you centered and calm. And he looks at me and goes, well, you don't think I'm kind of a Buddhist savant or something? I went, no. I don't, honey. Really, I don't. And, but I can also say this from the caregiver's perspective, because those 2 years of taking care of John, hopefully, are the hardest thing I'm ever going to do. It was certainly the hardest thing I've ever done, on many levels. John and I have been together 28 years, so it was, it wasn't. And there were times, and it's interesting because when you get the ALS diagnosis, like I said, it's like a death sentence from the beginning, and you start almost mourning from the beginning. The grief is there because you don't have that fight. God, it would have been nice to have a fight, and there would be times when I would get into what I would call my meltdowns, just losing it, curl up on the floor, keening, and often, usually I could get myself out of it. I could read, I could swim, I could, meditate, I could write, I could talk to my friends, I could drink more wine. But occasionally I would get into these meltdowns that would be a day or 2 days, and you're just like, oh God, how am I going to keep going forward? And one day I decided I'm going to eat one of John's cookies. And and it was a CBD mostly cookie.
Oh, good.
It had a little bit tasty.
I did that one time too, and 3 days later, after eating I don't know how many pounds of food, I decided that was not the plan for me, and I should have eaten less. But you do what you do.
Yeah. So anyway, I ate one of his cookies, right? And because I was at my wit's end, I needed to get out of this horrible space. And true, the squirrels got a little funnier just for a minute. But in about 20 minutes, I had what I've only been able to describe as a reboot. I wasn't high. I wasn't ready to dance a jig. And when you understand what happens with the endocannabinoid system, clearly when you're in that state of emotional distress, you are chemically imbalanced.
Definitely. And
when I took this cannabinoid cookie, mostly CBD. I mean, we just had hardly any THC in it all. Like I said, it energizes the endocannabinoid system, which finally said to the brain, "Hey, we got to fix this." And and within 20 minutes, half an hour, I had what I can only describe as a reboot. I knew I was going to be okay. I wasn't happy. I wasn't ready to dance a jig, but I was out of that space that I had been unable to get out of before.
That meltdown.
Yeah, the meltdown, what I called the meltdown. And I used those cookies throughout the rest of John's illness very judiciously. And I didn't want to take them every day or something because I wanted to make sure they worked when I got in that space, because I was very well aware that was going to be a place I was going to go to again.
Right.
And I'm so grateful for that level of mental support, equanimity, whatever you want to call it, that this medicine gave to both John and I.
You were drinking I mean, I don't want to dwell too much on exactly, Keith was taking the THC oil and the CBD tinctures, and that's helped with Parkinson's, and the oil, as we know, kills cancer. And John was drinking the green drink of high CBD. This was leaves and
and
flowers.
then when I got the flowers, yeah, we just mix it up and put it in ice cubes, keep it in the freezer, blend it up with whatever.
That's what I do.
So remarkable, because when I teach my class, Cannabis is Medicine, talking to patients about how to choose and use cannabis medicines, I often say, edibles, anything that goes into your stomach is not the best way to get a full cannabinoid profile into your bloodstream, because the stomach acids degrade it a little bit and then it moves on to the digestive tract. And there's digestive enzymes that break it down as well. But people still have benefits. And I think the best herbal medicine in the world is the one that works for you.
Right.
But you've hit on, and I want to just take this parenthetical pause before we come back to this meltdown question. But the parenthetical pause for our viewers is to know that when you go to MendocinoTV.com and you look at this program at the top tab, Cannabis News and Views, you drop down menu, and my full 90-minute class is available online for anybody who wants to see the class. And it's called Cannabis is Medicine, Changing the Narrative. And it goes deeply into the science of the endocannabinoid system, how it maintains homeostasis, how it even knows when you're out of stasis and what it needs to do to correct that. Being out of stasis as a caregiver becomes a pretty new normal in some ways, because we're talking about stress, worry, fear, sleep deprivation, economic insecurity. It hits you economically. I mean, one of the major concerns that particularly our fixed income patients at Dragonfly have is, I can't afford to pay for these and my insurance doesn't cover cannabis medicine. There's just one issue after another that gets thrown at us. And on top of that, for people who are not as comfortable with the cannabis world as you both are, coming from Mendocino, Humboldt counties, there's the fear factor, which just is another layer of stress. So I did, and you anticipated my next question that I wanted to go into. It's just, how do we guide people? Do we say, okay, caregivers, maybe you figure out what your cannabis medicine is too as a caregiver? What do you do to deal with the stress of taking care of someone with all of those pressures? It's what you said. It makes perfect sense. You reached for that cookie and that helped. It was a reboot. So for you, and this is one of the things I emphasize in my class, for everybody, it's going to be different, because the number one rule of herbal medicine is it's individuated. So what your dose is not my dose, is not Jan's dose, is not Keith's or John's. Everybody's dose is different. Their ratios are different depending on what they're treating. The delivery system that works for them is different. Smoking is great for symptom management, but not good for long-term healing. Edibles compromise the strength of the cannabinoid profile, but they can still work too. The best access to the bloodstream is through the membrane of the mouth, whether you let THC oil melt on the tongue and go through the membrane of your mouth, or you take a tincture and swish before swallowing for as long as you can, a high CBD tincture, swish, swish, swish. Those are the rules that help you make the best use of these medicines. And in this green rush that we're experiencing in the marketplace, you're going to find a lot of schlocky, compromised products on the shelves of dispensaries, and not the shelves, on the streets or wherever you're going to get your medicine from. And so it's important to know how to choose the best medicines, the purest, most potent, non-GMO, organic medicines, the kinds of things that the Laytonville medicine makers are so passionate about creating. But this question of the stress of being a caregiver, the old maxim, you put your oxygen mask on first. Right? You take care of yourself first. But we as women don't often do that. As women, it's the other person is always first. The husband, the boyfriend, the lover, the kids, everybody else comes first. So takes a rejigging of our whole psychology. And I just want to know if there are any particular words of advice, having gone through this period in your life that was so difficult. And then it doesn't end if your loved one passes.
Right.
Because
then you get to go into the next phase of grief.
Yeah, you have to deal with grief. Exactly. There's grief just from getting a diagnosis. And then there's another layer of grief if you lose your loved one. What words of wisdom can you give the people watching this program about that?
I meditate. I believe in God strongly. I believe in my angels. I talk to my angels. I have white light around me, candles. Very good about saying thank you, doing this. But we don't take care of ourselves. I have been sleeping on the couch the last week, and he likes the room really warm. I like cool. And sometimes I just have to take a break and take care of myself. A nice glass of wine, putting your feet up, reading a book, oils and herbs and soaps and teas and whatever. And I love to get in. I know I'm doing something. I spoke at an event not too long. I give you a hug. I'd come out of the venue and we were walking to the car. And he said, I wished I would have known you 3 years ago. They told my mother she had cancer. Later she died there. And it just about took me to my knees. If somebody would have told, you have to do the things. How smart to just take and eat one of these high CBD cookies and to share that. But you have to take care of yourself or you cannot take care of that other person. But when you see he's sitting down and eating a plate of food, those are our rewards. And it's because we took the time and the research with them to figure this out. I give a lot of things that I print out and do to Keith, and he reads it. And he understands. But it's tough. And I can't say enough how important it is for the care. And I'm very, very bad about that. Really bad about that.
One of the things, though, Libby, many patients coming into Dragonfly that their partner has cancer, they have cancer, but they're not on the same page.
That's unfortunate.
It's funny. I think we all search the world to find somebody opposite of ourselves so we can marry them and then we can drive each other nuts the rest of our lives. And that certainly describes John and I, in terms of our approach to life, never, I just believe goodness comes and flows and he never, but when it came to this, we were a team and but there are also times, like when he decided to, it's time for him to get the motorized wheelchair. I lost it because for me it was this huge thing in my face about the progression of the disease. For him, it was he could get to the bathroom quicker, he could get out and about more. But I want to go back to your thing about caregiving, and I think what I would say is I had to learn how to say yes. Because people would say, Linda, can I bring a meal over?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I mean, it was really hard to learn how to say yes.
Wow.
And can I help you? Like, yes, and to finally, let people do what they want to do to help. And then the other thing is, and I've got a friend right now whose husband is very ill, and I keep saying, you've got to get outside help sooner. Mm-hmm. It's very expensive. Yes, but you just have, John kept pushing, we need, I was getting up, 3, 4, 5 times a night. I'm getting thoroughly exhausted. And then we finally said, okay, we needed to have and I was giving John a massage every day and trying to cook meals and do all that. And the very dear friend we've worked with us for years came in and, started out like just 10 hours a week. And that was such a relief to have that, because when you get the help in, and this I think would be maybe the thing that would get people to do it, you get to stop being the caregiver and start being the wife and lover and friend again. Because there's a point where come on, honey, you have to eat this. You got to go. Let's go to the bathroom.
You're just nagging them.
Yeah. It's all those caregiving functions that take you away because you're exhausted and you're tired of, this whole thing that don't allow you to sit and watch, God help me, football, or whatever, or to just be together or to cook a nice meal and all that kind of stuff. So it's not only a gift to yourself, it's also a gift to the relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It makes you a fresher person.
Oh, yeah.
After that 10 hours, your friend came over and gave you a break, you're refreshed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was lucky because I could leave John. It wasn't like we needed somebody there 24/7. So during the day I could get away to, get a swim or something like that.
Right.
But it was still just that always there. But I can say very honestly that I have no regrets. I could not have done a better job. And to be able to say that is something I'm really glad, because I couldn't. I don't know how I could have done it any better.
That's great.
And
that's great.
Thank God for that.
Let me ask you pointedly, do you think that medicinal cannabis prolonged John's life?
I don't think there's any way I could say that, Jude.
Yeah.
Like I said, it controlled the symptoms. It made him more comfortable. It contributed to both of our equanimity. But no.
It made the quality of his life. Right. It sounds to me it made the quality of both of you, your life better.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. No, I understand that. It would be hard to gauge that with ALS, whereas with cancer, we every day we see tumors shrinking. We see people going up from stage 4 to stage 2 to nothing. So it's a hard thing. ALS is a tough one. And I really admire you for, the journey you took.
I don't know if admiration is the right word, but thank you.
I respect you, at least.
Okay, maybe that. Yeah, it's something I would rather not be admired for. It's because it's something you don't really want to do, I mean, it was something you never think you're going to have to do. And,
but the fact that you did it with such, grace and determination and strength, I think that's...
And cussing and drinking and carrying on.
Cussing and drinking and carrying on.
Let's get real. I am not an angel.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you left us with some we're coming to almost to the end of our hour, and I have so many more questions. But you left us with some very good advice, some very good thoughts about what you would definitely do, and that you were glad that you did in terms of getting help in earlier and those kinds of things. Jan, do you have any? If you look over the past 19 months with Keith, are there things that you wish you had or had not done, or final thoughts of advice for people who are entering this journey similarly with a loved one?
I'm glad that I'm on this journey with him. And I've taken care of many. How can you say that this weed, isn't that just to get high? I'm ready to answer them, is to get themselves in there. Plug these people, Brian at Humboldt Patient Resource Center, or Mark, or Mary Ellen, they will help you. And you just have to stick by your guns. Are there nights that you go to bed and you put the pillow over your head and you cry? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Is there nights when you sit down and you drink that whole bottle of wine? There are. You make every day count. We're very, very sick, or your child was very sick. You would want to get them that, or a child now. You have another option. You have cannabis. That option, you've got them. Consistency. It's else. You've got your people that are not so conscientious of things. There's Jews. I will sit there and talk to you about it. To take this journey. It is not easy. It is not. Getting help. I have a neighbor. What do you do when somebody has ALS or cancer? They don't know how can they help? She grows kale for me. And I juice it so when it's not kale season, I have it in little Dixie cups. I open it up out of the freezer and he's getting fresh kale in his smoothies. Everything I give Keith goes into a smoothie along with when he has regular meals so that he gets it, including the juiced cannabis leaves. I juice those like you put yours in ice cubes. I put mine in little Dixie cups. Just get yourself in. Last year with John was helping him. I give him somebody else to know, but you've got to inform yourself. You've got to be informed. It's a weed, for God's sakes. It's a weed.
Yeah, this is the quote of the day. It's a weed.
And, yes. In terms of the caregiving, I guess there is the gift to it. John and I have been together, 26 years or something, 28 years, when he got the diagnosis. And, you get used to each other and you kind of take each other for granted. And, we had a wonderful life. We traveled a lot and, John was, and we had some great trips and things we shared. But this disease brought us closer than I think may have never occurred. It took our love to a whole nother level. And so there's those things to be grateful for.
Absolutely.
And he still lives in my heart. So.
Absolutely. You
So
know
there
that you
is a
talked
gift.
about football?
There is the gift.
There are Sundays I jump on that bed when he's not feeling like getting up. I get myself get the dogs and cats up there. Who cares? And I'll sit there all day and watch.
Yeah, you know what?
I'm not surprised.
But I will watch the Warriors. And the NBA and the NCAA, but the football has gone.
The things we
there's
do.
There's only so much we can do. And you know, I think one of the things, I think you make another good point. At one point, John says, okay, I'm going to be housebound. And I said, like hell. You know, we got a handicap van. I would get him in there and, we go and we come out to the coast and we, stay overnight and this, that, and the other thing. And every time we got back, he thanked me. So you also have to, you have to be that cheerleader, which is, with the cheese.
I think you know what it is too, Mary? I think it's you and I's delicate personalities.
Oh, you are, yeah. They certainly were.
They do.
We're going to bring.
I have my business now that I've separated, and I make a lot of cannabis products for cancer patients, and a lot of people know me as and call me Green Granny.
Oh, Green Granny, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And we feature some of Jan's products in Dragonfly Wellness Center. So anybody wants to pick some of them up, come on by the coast here. We're gonna wrap it up here. I'm so grateful to have both of you. This has been such a good discussion. It's so we could go on for much longer, but this has been rich. This has been really rich, and I'm greatly appreciative of your coming on the program. I have a couple of community announcements. We see ourselves as a community resource. So if anybody has anything they want to add, give me feedback. You can write to news-views@dragonflywellness.org. Give me your feedback. Give me your ideas. Anything you want to share. Please, here's the first announcement. Please spread the word that the Latino Coalition is sponsoring a workshop for Spanish-speaking parents of teens, and it has a new date and location. This is a program that's sponsored by our wonderful organization here, Safe Passage, and the executive director, Laura Welter. Do you know Laura? She's wonderful. She's a real civic leader here on the coast. So this one's great. How to talk to your teenager, which reminds me, but I'll finish the announcement. We got a show coming up just about teenagers. How to Talk to Your Teenager, Wednesday, December the 6th, from 6 to 7:30 p.m. in the Fort Bragg Library Meeting Room at 499 East Laurel Street in Fort Bragg. And I'm going to try this because unless I try it, I'll never learn how to do it. Por favor de repartir la noticia que el taller patrocinado por la Coalición Latina para padres de adolescentes tiene una nueva fecha y ubicación. Este taller es presentada en español. Cómo hablar con su adolescente. Miércoles 6 de diciembre, 6 a 7:30, Fort Bragg Library Meeting Room, 499 499 East Laurel Street in Fort Bragg.
Very good. Whew.
Apologies for the bad
Very
accent.
Very good.
And then if you want to learn more things about, let me tell you about our show coming up. We have a special 2-part series on the opioid crisis in this country and cannabis as an option in dealing with opioids.
I've actually been approached about that lately, Jude.
Yeah.
A couple adults say that they're mothers, and can I help? Can we do something?
Yes. No, it's an incredible crisis. We are losing hundreds of people a day to the opioid crisis. Yeah. It's quite something. So those programs will be on November 29th and December 13th, 2 in a row. And we'll have all kinds of incredible guests for that. If you want to hear more information about cannabis in Mendocino County, do tune in to the Cannabis Hour, November 2nd, 9 a.m. on KZYX. And this next program, they're going to have the track and trace issue with Carmel Angelo, who's the CEO of Mendocino County. Track and trace is the cannabis tracking system that Mendocino County's licensed cannabis cultivators must use, required to use, to follow their cannabis crop from seedling to distribution. Mendocino County CEO Carmel Angelo and a representative from SIPCA, the program the county has adopted, will join host Jane Futcher on the Cannabis Hour, explaining how the system works and why it is different from the track and trace system the state of California has adopted. That's Thursday, November 2nd at 9 a.m. on KZYX, your community radio station. This has been Mendocino TV, Cannabis News and Views, and thanks for watching.
Dude, you're the best. You're the best for doing this.